and South FM, and it's reached that time of the month again where we have our financial expert, Breffni May of May Financial Planning, back in the studio. Breffni, welcome back.
Nice to be back.
Yeah, listen, as always, we have a lot to talk about. There's a lot going on out there.
Interesting time.
So we'll kick off with international business, as we normally start with a big topic. Greece. We've been talking about it a lot, and it's moves to quell fears and meet obligations. Next Thursday, they've got a 450 million payment due to the IMF.
Yeah.
Now, they face a conundrum at the moment.
Absolutely.
Whether to pay wages or pensions in Greece, or whether to make this IMF payment.
Simple question.
Are we at high noon yet?
We are.
Are we?
Yes.
All right, okay.
It's very simple for politicians to talk about. I mean, Labour had the same problem before the last election here in Ireland. They could go in, they could jump up and down and say, we're going to do this, that and the other. Very different when you get inside the tent and you realise, there's an awful lot more implications here. It's not that simple. Everything looks easy from the outside, but once you get into the middle of it, you realise that there is a realpolitik and you have to go with it. Greece will run out of money. And when they run out of money, what happens to their banks? They're being kept afloat at the moment. And the people who are keeping them afloat are the European Union. If they don't play ball with Europe, in some way, shape or form, and let's be honest, they've had the same length of time we've had to deal with their problem. We solved it. Spain and Portugal didn't like it, but they are solving it. Greece hasn't done nothing about solving their problem, and they've just let it rip and let it run. And now it's got to the point where they now have to solve the problem. And they have to solve the problem of balancing the books. They had the same problem we had. They don't have an economy that works or functions. They don't have banks that function the same as ours do. They had the same problems with their banks, and they now have to deal with this. So what do they do? I mean, the question I'm keep asking is, do they want to stay, or do they want to be pushed out, or are they going to walk on their own? And okay, it's my view is the Greek government are looking to be pushed out. They would like to leave, which might give them a bit more freedom in the short term, but it's going to create absolute havoc for them at the end of the day. But they have to decide, and the Greek people have to decide, do they want to deal with this problem properly and have a future? We did.
But is it not a case that we were in a better position? Really, the Greeks, it's like somebody in really that has a tsunami of bad debts. You've got
we had.
Yeah, but I think their situation maybe is that they don't have the shall we say, the open economy that we have. And maybe they don't have the safety valve of immigration.
People pay taxes. Mm-hmm. In Ireland, in Spain and in Portugal. They don't. It's endemic. They know what the problem is. They know what the solution is. Collect your taxes and pay your bills and start balancing the books. And if you don't do that, you've got a problem. And, if they're not prepared to do that, then they run into a problem. I mean, their credibility is seriously being questioned at Europe. And I'll have to say to you, there was a time in this country where you were wondering, which bin would you get your dinner out of? Oh, the bank's going to crash or going to collapse. Well, they collapsed in Cyprus, and we saw what happened there. The banks shut, there was no money, the ATM stopped functioning, and our economy shut down. And then the European Union came in and said, okay, this is what you do. And they slammed the banks together, and they restructured them. And Greece effectively lost control of its economy. But they have taken the problem seriously, and they're now dealing with it. Greeks don't seem to be dealing with it. But yes, they are at high noon. They have a commitment to make back to the IMF. And, and it wasn't easy for us either. I mean, lots of people lost their homes. Lots of people lost their businesses. And, just because the economy is picking up doesn't mean that the real problem has gone away. The real problem is in the empty beds and dinner tables around this country, all over this country, where children and young people have left in their droves because they had to. They had no choice. That was our safety valve. That worked for us. We were used to doing that. But so are the Greek people. So are the Spaniards. The Spaniards are leaving. They're travelling all over Europe. By the way, that's nothing new. This is the United States of Europe. If you're living in New York and you can't find a job in New York and you want to go to California, off you go, jump on a train, on a bus, and off you go. And that's the way Europe was set out to be. And that's what the hope I've had for my kids. That if they can't find work here in Ireland, the world is their oyster. Off you go. Europe is there. And disappear into the middle of it. That's what the common market's about. That's what common travel is for. And the Greeks don't want to take that option of going and living in Italy or Spain or Germany or Portugal or France. That's their choice. Mm-hmm. But our people do it at the drop of a hat. And there's nothing wrong with going away.
So this is the end of the sticking plaster.
Absolutely.
We've had one sticking plaster after another sticking plaster.
It's been fudge.
And are we're finally reaching the end game, are we?
Yes, we are. And they're going to have to make a decision. Are they still in the game or are they out?
Would you think they've already plans for a parallel currency arranged at this stage? It has to be. Yeah.
We did. We'd be daft if they didn't. But it's not a choice they're going to go. If they have commitments to make, they have to raise money. No government is able to pay all its bills out of what it earns, and no country can, and the Greeks certainly can't. And if they're not going to get the money from Europe, where are they going to get it from? Their credibility is shot, and it's high noon for them. They have to make a decision. Are they going to bite the bullet and pay the prices that we had to pay, and the rest of Europe had to pay to get out of this mess? And France is having to pay for it. Nobody liked it. But there is no easy solution here. This is difficult. And we are still paying it. And it still comes up in this question about, are we paying over and above on our variable interest rates in banks? That's a real problem. And, that's part of our legacy issue. Our banks are still broken. It hasn't gone away.
Yeah, I suppose that segues nicely into the variable mortgages, which we have our own domestic high noon. Maybe not to the same degree, but Noonan met with Honohan. And there's a conundrum for the government at the moment. Is politically it'd probably look really well if they brokered a deal with the banks that are, well, effectively we own, as we say, and coming up to an election if they got a cut in the variable mortgages. But the conundrum is they got to sell these banks, yeah?
Yes.
So
they've got to be profitable.
They got to be profitable. So
and the idea of politicians in the middle of setting interest rates or banks, no thank you, don't want that. They're businesses just like any other business like mine. They have to have the freedom to make the economic decisions that suit them. Maybe we don't like it. But you have to remember the banks are still stuck with people, and God bless them, they're welcome to it. They've got their fixed rates at nothing based on the European
more to the
central
point,
bank rates.
More to the point, the
and
tracker rates.
The tracker rates, and it's costing
you
those
can never
banks.
have to come off.
They're costing you and me a fortune. And unfortunately, because of the structure of the market that we have, people who are on variable interest rates are having to pay some of the price for that. And there's no way out of it.
Well, let's put some perspective on that price, because there's nothing better than hard figures. For a couple that would be earning 35 grand each in the economy at the moment, they would need to 11 weeks extra to earn enough money to pay for a variable mortgage over and above the tracker rate at the moment. So
that's right. Yeah.
So a variable mortgage are costing people maybe 3 months extra, about €12,500 a year, which is massive.
It is massive. But we are in extraordinary times, and I go back to before the crash, and variable rates looked competitive compared to some of the fixed rates. And at the moment, the tide went out on fixed rates, and they fell down because they were linked to the European Central Bank. The European Central Bank rate dropped like a stone, and so the fixed rates and the tracker rates all dropped like a stone, dropped to the floor. And the variable rates look silly now. They've been left on the beach when the tide went out, and that's all that's happened. And unfortunately, we don't have a properly functioning banking market, and you don't have the option of going to another lender and moving your money to somebody else, because the banks are still broken. When you think about it, I inherited 330 shares in permanent TSB. They're worth 6 cents each. The government owns the rest, and it's worth nothing. And that's not a functioning bank. That's a bank owned by the government, and owned by you and me. And we don't have choices here. They're still busted. AIB is still owned by us. And if the government wants to sell it, they've got to sell it as a commercial ongoing business. And it has to be profitable. And that profit has to come from somewhere. And that, unfortunately, has to come from you and me, who borrow money from banks. And we pay it back at rates. And that's all that's happened. Do I like the idea of politicians poking their nose in an election year into the business of banks? No thanks. Where will they go next?
So,
if you go into it, and the insolvency problem as well hasn't been solved either. And the type of talking about writing off debt, and if you're writing off debt for people and the banks not coming to cut deals, that's destabilising the assets of the bank by writing off debt. And that means you and I may end up having to put more money into our banks. And there isn't a snowball's chance in hell of this government putting any more money into Bank of Ireland or AIB to cut a deal for Jimmy down the road. And you do have to remember that there are some people out there who won't pay their mortgages.
You're talking about the strategic defaulting here that has been
there are people who can't afford to pay, who have gone to great lengths to hide their assets, and they won't pay. and they are putting the gun in the bank's mouth and pretending to pull the trigger. You have them out there, and if you do it for one, you have to do it for all. But yes, the insolvency thing, as we talked about this from the very beginning, it was set up. It was broken on the day it was set up, and it hasn't been working ever since.
But what about now? Is they've talked about the banks, this veto power. The big thing has been about the bank's veto here, and that's the one thing that they have here that they don't have in England to the same extent. They're talking about an overhaul of that and lessening it. So because they say 1/3 of deals are refused by the bank.
That's right.
So which is I just see here it is 6 times the UK average.
Yes.
So we got to get it in line here with international recommendations. So to lessen that veto or to take it away completely, maybe have an independent body.
Maybe there should be a judicial system where somebody actually overlooks the deals to see if they're viable or not, and whether they're the right thing to be done. I don't know, but that is there's a review taking place. You also have to remember there are very small numbers have gone through the insolvency system since it was set up. It's set up about a year and a bit.
But is that because they don't see the value in it?
They don't trust it.
Yeah.
And it's a new system, but they don't trust it. Nobody wants to become somebody else's learning curve. And that's the problem. And you go into one of these things and you end up going down the road, and you can end up having a deal that's put in place that lasts for a 5-year period and could end up being renewed at the end of it for another 5 years. And the bank's controlling your income and your assets and your expenditure over that period. So there's a lot to work through on this thing. There's been problems in this thing, in the insolvency system since it started. And there were a lot of question marks about it. But if people aren't taking it up, then they're voting with their feet. They're saying, we don't trust it yet. But yes, the banks always had that veto from day one. And whether it was right or not, government approved it. Or maybe they got stuck with it. I don't know.
Now, the house prices. The first 2 months of this year, we've seen a fall in house prices, particularly in Dublin.
Yeah.
So, is this a start of a decline? I mean, 50% of the buyers last year were cash buyers, but are they gone now? I mean, all these, the capital gains, tax exemption, everything is gone. But what's going on in the market there, from your view?
From my point of view, I think we're getting into a real market.
Yeah.
We're now getting to stage now where the banks are beginning to lend for home loans. Not vast amounts of money, not going back to the madness we had before, but you're now beginning to get a real market taking place, where people are looking at it and saying, no, I'm not paying that price. And, and the house is just as much, a house and a teapot is exactly the same. They're only worth what somebody else is prepared to pay for it. And maybe we're beginning to see the emergence of a real market, not driven by people who have pots of cash and we're looking for opportunities in the market. You have a situation where the investors who had bought into the commercial market at the beginning of the recession and are now offloading that stuff and are now profit taking in the market. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But are the real investors, is the pot of people that are out there who are looking for good value, are looking for great value, have that dried up? Perhaps it has. But we're now probably looking at a real market value. Is the central bank regulation that they brought in recently, is it having an impact? Of course it is. People are having to stand back. The mortgage cap. They're having to stand back and decide, will we, won't we? Can we afford to? Will we not? I mean, that's when you begin to get a real market. And up to now, we haven't had a real market. Property is only worth what somebody else is prepared to pay for it. As I was hearing on the radio coming across, maybe people are beginning to say, no, hang on a second, I'd quite happily put up with a commute from Mullingar to Dublin rather than pay the price that has been asked at the moment for property in Dublin. Those are choices that are beginning to get into that sort of play area. We're now looking at a real market beginning to happen. But the banks are still broken. They're still not lending, and they're being very careful and very choosy about who they're lending to. Very careful.
Now, you hit an interesting point there that a lot of the, shall we say, the vulture funds or the international investors who came in here in 2011, 2012 and bought it at the bottom of the market, a lot of them are getting out. But you reckon for them, there's just better value elsewhere. That's what they do.
There's profit taking.
And are they selling it to real estate investment trusts then, who maybe take a long-term view?
They're taking a longer-term view. They're opening these investments now up to you, the likes of you and me, to invest in these things on a very long-term basis. Property is not a short-term, quick get in, get out, make a profit. It's now we're now getting into a real market where you have to say property as an investment. And, it's astonishing that we're still talking about property 7 years later.
We'll be talking about it in 7 years' time as well.
they're a long-term investment of 20 to 30 years. They're not short-term, quick, get in, make a fortune, get out. They're not going to provide your pension fund to you at the end of the day, unless you're really going to be able to put pots of cash into it. And they are very expensive items to buy and very expensive items to maintain. And all the charges and costs that are now being loaded in are making them uneconomic as an investment asset, when there are lots of other more flexible assets out there that are available to people. But REITs, yes, they allow you to buy a property, but again, it's a structured fund, just like every other fund that an insurance company would offer, a managed fund or a multi-asset fund that's out there. That's all they are.
There was a very interesting article in the Sunday Times about, they called him the phantom property investor. It's a guy called Greg Kavanagh who's come in, and clearly this guy's got first mover advantage.
Absolutely.
A lot of developers are tied up in that. What he basically has done, he's 300 million has been brought here to invest in residential developments. It's probably quality developments you were talking about.
He's buying into premium quality investments. And he's also teeing up the investment fund in the UK for investing long-term in Irish domestic home assets for leasing into the Irish market on a long-term basis. They can see things have changed in this country. They can see the future of the Irish economy is growing and developing, and there are opportunities there for them to make money long-term, and are viewing this as a long-term investment. And yeah, sure, he's been the phantom investor. Clever guy. Good egg, good head in his shoulders. And he's got his money in the pot, and he has their money in the pot. And he's looking for prime opportunities for long-term investment. And that's what property is. It's not short-term, quick, buy it today, sell it tomorrow. Those days are well and truly behind us. But you have to remember that Ireland is one of the fastest growing economies in Europe. Okay, we had the safety valve, we got rid of a huge number of people out of the country, but our economy is growing. And by the way, we are in an election year. And when we are in an election year, it's a very strange year. Lots of funny things happen. Politicians are, quite happy to go and play up the game. So a lot of things that you're going to hear about, and the teachers are meeting down there, and oh yes, the minister's all interested in this, that and the other, and money might be available for this, that and the other. Well, the government has done a good job at making sure that the books are balanced, and we are actually getting out of the hole that we're in. But, there are a lot of threats out there, and a lot of things can go wrong.
Now, you work as an independent financial advisor, and I suppose a big thing at the moment is providing for their retirement.
Yes.
Yeah. So has that changed? It's a very dynamic area now. I mean, the good old safe copper fastened pension is not as good as what it was 10 or 15 years ago.
The defined benefit pension arrangements that civil servants used to have and bank managers used to have are a thing of the past. They're as dead as the dodo, and they are gone for here today and gone tomorrow. And what I do and what my colleagues do is hugely important to people. When they're funding for their retirement, and this is a question, I don't know what retirement really means, that concept of retiring at 65 years of age, just because you got the 65 or the state pension comes along, that concept should be put in the bin. I have friends of mine who still have their parents with them at 90 years of age. And a significant cohort of people have their parents still at 90 years of age. And we're going to be around that length of time. What are you going to do to fill it? So retirement is not the concept of just not working. One of the issues that came up recently talking to a number of my clients, because we help them plan for retirement, and those who've gone over the line, and asking them what their issues were and why they felt about retiring. And one of them was their identity, who they were. That was hugely important. That, one of them was regarded as a teacher, and so herself as a teacher. But when she wasn't a teacher, she was no longer a mum, she was a wife, she was a spouse, but she wasn't a teacher. And coming to terms with that loss of identity, and the other thing as well is loss of all the camaraderie and the friends that they had built up in work, and loneliness coming into it. Numbers of people who retire and have never thought and given any consideration to what they want to do when they actually, quote, retire. Because there are a huge number of changes coming around when you stop working. And it's not about money. Money is just what you need. Having enough is what it's about retiring. Making sure you've got enough to do the things you want to do in life. That's not about pensions. That's about deciding what kind of life are you going to have for yourself after you're no longer working. And maybe the idea of not working all the time should be considered, and having something else to do to fill your day and earn a few bob at it Because I go back to this thing. The most sought after workforce in France is the grey crowd. People like me who've got grey touch on top. Why? Because we're committed to work. We don't want to do it every day of the week for the rest of our days. But we'll come to work, and when we come to work, we actually go to work. You know, there is a big difference, and we have years of experience, which is in our particular professions. That, you know, stuff that we take as every day is sometimes rocket science to other people, and they can use that valuably in their lives and in their businesses. So, I mean, this idea of just retiring and walking away from work, I don't understand it. My views on that have changed. But yes, when it comes to retiring and having enough resources, you don't have to have all the money available to you on one day when you retire. So you've got to be thinking in terms of investing that money out over 20, 30, maybe 40 years, if you're unfortunate and live too long, which is not a problem. But that's what we deal with, is we deal with people and help them to decide, what do you want to do when you're no longer working? What will retirement be? Don't tell me what you're going to do in the first 6 months. I want to know what you're doing 2 years after you retire, because that's what life is about. And a lot of my friends who have retired and admit that they went too soon are lonely and bored. That's a huge problem. And, you know, they're fit and healthy. At 67 years of age, you've got all your fit. You know, we're living longer. We're living with illnesses that killed other people 10, 15, 20 years ago. And people are going to be hanging around for a long time. What are you going to fill it with? And there's nothing wrong with work. And there's nothing wrong with the camaraderie that comes with working. There's nothing wrong with that at all.
So listen, Breffni, it's been an absolute pleasure as always having you on the show.
We
can't wait to have you back next month again.
Okay,
you're listening to Business Eye here on Dublin South FM. On today's show with Breffni May of May Financial Planning. And that's all from this week's show. I'd like to thank